blasted his subwoofers for 12 hours straight, argued that a father asking him to turn it down for his sleeping kids had no right to talk to him like that, and woke up the next morning to his car keyed down to the metal. 5 stories today, and this first one might be the least self-aware AITA post you'll hear all week. His car is, in his own words, his entire life. A tuned Subaru WRX STI, more comfortable behind that wheel than in his own bed. He pays extra every month for a shaded mechanic spot at his apartment complex specifically so he can work on it. And when he works on it, he blasts the sound system, because apparently that's how he thinks. The complex has quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. He insists he never once broke that rule. What he also did every weekend was crank the bass from just after 8 a.m. until just before 10 p.m. Nearly 12 hours straight, back to back, week after week. One Sunday, 2 different neighbors asked him to turn it down. He did. Briefly. One came back a second time, clarifying it wasn't really the volume, just the bass rattling through the walls. Could he turn that down specifically? He said he'd try. Not good enough, apparently, because the same neighbor came back a third time. That's when he told the man flatly that he'd paid for the spot, wasn't breaking any rules, and would only be out there until 10 p.m. anyway. The neighbor explained his kids needed to be asleep by 8:30, and the bass was shaking their walls. He told the man he'd done his best to accommodate him and was done discussing it. The neighbor said he'd call the police and talk to management. The police, apparently, never showed. He responded by turning his system up louder to drown out what he described as the neighbor's barking. His property manager eventually emailed him directly. She'd received complaint after complaint. She gently asked if he'd consider headphones when working on the car, purely so the rest of the building could have some peace. He agreed to try it, hated it, and made it clear in his own recap that going back to silence after spending thousands of dollars on his sound system felt like a genuine sacrifice to him. A short time after posting all of this and being told near unanimously that he was very much in the wrong, he posted an update. His car had been keyed. Not a scratch. Key marks running the length of the car, some down to bare metal, less than a month after he'd had it repainted. He was furious, insisting he'd already stopped blasting bass by that point and that nobody had any right to do this to his car. Which may be true in the narrowest legal sense, and also spectacularly misses the point that when you spend 12 hours a weekend broadcasting your hobby to an entire apartment complex and treat every polite request to dial it back as a personal insult, you're not exactly making yourself hard to identify as the source of the problem, or hard to find in a parking lot. That was a story about a man who couldn't hear anyone else's needs over his own subwoofers. This next one is much heavier. A mother who couldn't or wouldn't hear her own daughter's fear. A mother describes her 18-year-old daughter and 27-year-old son, the latter on the autism spectrum and physically disabled, never having held a job. According to her own account, her son had been behaving inappropriately and invasively toward his sister since she was around 10 years old, including attempts at surveillance that no sibling should ever be subjected to. Her daughter had been begging her mother to make him leave the home since she was 14. For years, the mother didn't see it as urgent enough to act on. Things only actually moved when, this past February, her daughter called the police herself after her brother was caught filming her from underneath a closed door. He'd already been explicitly told he wasn't allowed on the second floor of the house. He ignored that boundary too. After police were involved, he spent 2 weeks hospitalized and roughly a month in government housing, followed by 2 more months cycling through hotels while his parents searched for a permanent apartment for him. a search complicated by his own refusals, since he turned down more than one option for simply being too small. Her daughter has repeatedly told her mother she should stop financially supporting her brother altogether. Her mother's answer every time is the same. He's still her son. In her daughter's account, she'd reached a point of being willing to leave home entirely rather than keep living under the same roof as him. Sleeping in a tent, staying with a male friend, anything, until the police incident finally forced the issue. She's since told her mother directly that paying for her brother's new apartment feels like a slap in the face, given what she was prepared to sacrifice for her own safety while her mother hesitated for years. By her mother's own description, her daughter is bright and creative, but has stopped attending school and spends most of her time isolated in her room, with very few friends left, and increasingly wants to go anywhere she does go entirely alone. The comment that sits underneath this whole account, and it's hard to argue with it, whatever complicated feelings a parent has about a struggling adult child, none of it excuses years of hesitation while a minor in the same house was begging to be protected. That one is a hard listen. Here's something much lighter. A friendship nearly wrecked, not by betrayal, but by way, way too much unsolicited honesty about a newborn. Her best friend of 15 years had just given birth and asked her sincerely at the hospital to be completely honest about whether the baby was cute. She couldn't tell, obviously, being the mother. Honesty had always been the backbone of their friendship. She'd never held back on a bad haircut or an ugly outfit before, and her friend had always said she appreciated that quality about her. So she figured, why treat this any differently? She told her the baby looked a little alien-like at first glance, that his head seemed a bit oversized. Her friend laughed it off. Then, by her own admission, her neurodivergent brain kept going. Bulging eyes, unusually long arms, a double chin, more detail than anyone had asked for, until her friend, still holding her newborn, was in tears. She was asked to leave the room. Later that day, a long text arrived. Her friend wasn't speaking to her anymore. Said she'd gone too far, that she thought her baby was adorable and didn't deserve to be described that way. She still maintains she was just answering honestly, exactly as she'd been asked to. Which may technically be true, but there's a reason most people quietly agree on two unspoken rules around new parents. Never guess whether someone's pregnant unless you already know for certain. And when someone shows you a newborn, the only acceptable answer is some version of "so cute." Nobody's actually asking for a structural analysis of the baby's face. They're asking to be told their child is loved. From an overshare about a newborn to a very different kind of overcorrection. This one happened at a university IT desk in the middle of finals week. Two student workers at a university IT department shared the same well-performing computer on different shifts. One of them was trying to get a pair of Bluetooth earbuds to connect, couldn't get it working, and decided the standard fix, fully re-imaging the machine back to its factory state, would solve it. It didn't fix the Bluetooth. It did, however, wipe every account and every locally saved file on that shared computer, belonging to every coworker who used it in the middle of finals week. The coworker whose files disappeared was understandably furious and reported it to their shared manager, saying it had taken over an hour just to log back in and re-download everything lost. The person who'd caused it tried explaining it wasn't really their fault that anyone had saved files locally instead of to the cloud, then made a meme about the situation and posted it, captioned something like, "Me when the desktop gets re-imaged." That did not go over well. The coworker stopped speaking to them entirely and reportedly escalated the complaint above their manager. It's a genuinely relatable impulse. See a small, annoying problem, reach for the biggest, most familiar tool available to fix it, and a solid reminder that the usual fix isn't always the right fix when other people's work is sitting on the same machine, especially during the 1 week of the semester when nobody has time to lose an hour re-downloading their files. Last one for today. This is about an idea, a wedding announcement, and a friendship suddenly wondering who actually owns the concept of eloping. For years, she'd told anyone who'd listen that she never wanted a traditional wedding. Too expensive, too stressful, too tied up in traditions she didn't care for. Her plan, whenever the time came, was to elope somewhere scenic with her partner and her photographer best friend, then mail out surprise announcements afterward, and celebrate with a casual reception. Back in May, at that same best friend's graduation party, the topic of weddings came up in front of a mutual friend. She shared her whole plan out loud, and the mutual friend thought it was a great idea. Fast forward to July, and that same mutual friend posted her own wedding announcement on Facebook. Eloped, using the same photographer friend, phrased almost exactly the way she described wanting to phrase her own future announcement, revealing they'd secretly been married for 2 months already. Her first reaction was pure disbelief. This was, specific wording and all, the plan she'd been talking about for years, using her own friend as the photographer. When she brought it up with their mutual friend, the response was that eloping quietly hadn't been an intentional copy, and that it probably wasn't a big deal anyway, especially since she herself was single at the time, and marriage wasn't exactly on her immediate horizon. Now she feels foolish for having shared her idea so openly, worried that if she ever does elope the same way herself down the line, it'll look like she copied someone else's wedding instead of the other way around. It's worth saying plainly, eloping quietly and announcing afterward isn't a novel concept anyone gets to claim ownership over. It's simply how elopement has always worked, by definition, for about as long as marriage itself has existed. 5 very different situations. One shared thread. Moments where someone couldn't quite see their own role in the problem until it was pointed out. Sometimes gently, sometimes with a key. Which story stuck with you most? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for a new story every day. See you tomorrow.